Cash is king in an emergency situation. Well, most of the time. Hey everyone, Tactical Timmy here. I wanted to talk about barter items, and especially barter items in an emergency situation. All of us in the gold and silver community obviously are huge fans of having gold and silver in reserve for those emergency situations when we need to come up with things to buy. And the best way to do that, a lot of times, is not actually going to be storing gold and silver. Most of the time, it's going to be actually what you see right in the center, carrying cash, because cash is what our society runs on. It adds a whole extra step if I have to run down to the coin shop and sell this gold coin. A lot of people in our society today simply just don't know the value of gold and silver. You can go in and ask people the value of these coins, and they're just not going to know the value of some of our favorite coins. They will undervalue it a lot of times, and sometimes they'll overvalue it. It just depends on the person. And that's not something in an emergency situation you are willing to risk. In an emergency situation, we wanted to have known assets and known values of what things are worth. Most of the time, that's going to be cash. Everyone knows the value of a $20 bill. They all know that, well, you can probably get about a meal and a half out nowadays, and you can probably feed yourself for a good little bit on $20. But they don't know the value of these silver coins. They don't know the value of the gold coins. And today I wanted to talk about other barter items because I see on the internet a lot of preppers that talk about using barter items like salt or ammunition or even alcohol and other vices as barter items, and that's something that I think is so unlikely to happen in the future. If there is a complete collapse at some point, yeah, sure, maybe we'll barter, but we have so many other issues and so many other problems and things to think through before we actually get to those situations. When we're thinking about emergency situations, it's much more important to think about the more likely situations and be prepared for those things before we start stretching out and thinking about the less likely situations. So let's talk about what makes a good item to trade, or what makes good money. It has to be a good medium of exchange. So what does that actually mean? It means that it's easy to trade back and forth, and actually people will take it, trading it back and forth. So obviously currency fits that bill. It also has to store value. So storing value is where I would say that your cash is actually going to be losing out, because cash its value tends to go down over time. Whereas you look at our gold and silver, or really any of these other goods back here, and their value tends to go up over time. And that is where I would point you to where we shouldn't be only saving in cash, but cash is something that's really important to have on hand. So it needs to have a good store value. That's where gold and silver shines. Beyond having a store of value, it has to be fungible and interchangeable. So what do I mean by that? This $20 bill is the same value as this $20 bill, as the same value as another $20 bill that's out there. And that works for a lot of other things. You have our silver that's very similar. If you have one eagle, it's valued the same as another eagle. Now, obviously, if you have one completely marred up, and just like if I got a really crumpled up $20 bill from a guy on the street, well, I do slightly value it less, even though I probably can unfold this bill and it'll buy the same goods at the store. I'm gonna be a little more suspect of the wrinkly bill that's out there. That just doesn't look as nice, and it's not going to be as reassuring as a new crisp bill. We have to have that interchangeability. That doesn't work for a lot of goods. You've got goods in the back, obviously these bourbons, some of y'all have your favorites here, and with those, they have different values associated with them over time. You have ammunition. Not all ammunition is created the same. Obviously, you've got green tip, you've got more traditional ammunition, and all those things go into changing the value. Not to mention, that's 5.56. You could also have 9mm, you could have other calibers that won't even work for your weapons. So ammunition is not necessarily as fungible or as interchangeable as cash or gold and silver. Now, salt, on the other hand, we'll keep going through our list here of different barter items that people have suggested. Salt is actually pretty interchangeable. There are different kinds of salt that you might see out there. You've got obviously iodized salt, which doesn't store quite as well as opposed to non-iodized salt, but the iodine is something that's really important in our diet, so that's why you see it here. here, but you have differences between the salt. You've got rock salt, you've got, this traditional table salt, you've got canning and pickling salts. So there's lots of differences between them. So it's not as interchangeable as we might like. The third property of what makes something good in terms of a barter item or in terms of money is going to be actually that it's durable. We already saw with my crinkled up cash, it's not as durable, but it does actually take a fair amount of abuse, and you can get this $20 bill wet and it's still probably going to be fine, and I could still dry it out and use it at the store. But it is not going to be as durable as some of our silver or gold coins that are going to last for years and years, into the thousands of years. We can go back to Roman days and see some of these Roman coins that still are holding their value. Now, some people will point back here to the bourbon as a good store value because once it is bottled, it will last for basically forever as long as the seal remains intact up at the top. And that's something that I do see does store the value pretty well, and you can get an old bottle of bourbon that will sell and do really well in terms of storing its value and being really durable. But a lot of times these durability in these glass containers is just not as good as we would like it to be, because simply dropping some of these glass containers will be enough to actually break it. And there you go, you no longer have your bourbon. Now, ammunition is pretty durable as long as you're keeping it in a sealed container. That can be something that is a store of value and is pretty durable. Obviously, you can't expose it to ridiculous amounts of moisture. Otherwise, it can corrode over time and you're not going to have the same value. And salt. We'll continue on our round table here. Salt is obviously not going to be quite as durable if it gets moisture in it or humidity in it. It's going to degrade over time, and a lot of times you'll see it actually cake up. That's actually part of the reason why, if you're storing in large quantities, you don't want to store the iodized, is because the iodine is actually going to help cake up the salt. So again, when it comes to durability, our gold and silver is winning, but cash also is pretty good when it comes to durability. You can crumple it up, you can get it wet. It's harder to tear than normal paper, but it does last pretty good, and it seems to serve the job for the shorter term emergencies and the more likely emergencies. All right, let's move on to our next thing that makes a good barter item, and that is going to be, it needs to be portable. So cash is pretty portable unless you're carrying around $1 bills and you're trying to actually store lots and lots of value. If you have $1 bills and you have to carry around, $3,000 of cash, all of a sudden that becomes quite a large backpack worth of money. And that's luckily not something that we're going to be doing. If we're carrying around thousands of dollars, we're probably going to be carrying a little more high denomination bills. So cash is pretty portable. Bourbon, not so much. Silver even can get not as portable as well, and gold would be what I would say is probably winning in terms of portability, because we don't have the phrase worth its weight in gold for nothing, because it is so portable. Ammunition, terrible when it comes to portability. If anyone's ever picked up a full 50 cal ammo can of any caliber, whether it's 5.56 or 9mm, it is heavy and very hard to take around. Salt, terrible in terms of portability and just not something that I would recommend. The next thing I wanted to talk about, and one of the final things, is that it has to be acceptable to people. And this is where a lot of preppers will say that you need to find different barter items for different people, because it does have to be acceptable to them. Some people are going to like the value in cash because they know that value in cash. Some people understand the value of silver and gold, so they might prefer precious metals. And other people might prefer just having goods, and that's where they would point you towards the bourbon and the actual commodities that they're using. And that would be a good way to barter with them, because they understand the value of goods and services and commodities. Ammunition would be something that I would be careful bartering with people if I don't know them or I don't understand what they're using the ammunition for. That would be something I would be very, very hesitant to do. But again, that would be acceptable to a lot of people. Some people aren't going to realize the value of salt and what all you can use salt for. So they're just simply not going to accept. They're going to say 5 pounds of salt. What the heck would I use 5 pounds of salt for? That seems like it would be worthless to me. But other people who are doing canning and are going to use salt for preserving meats, they understand the value of salt and see that that's something that they can use to preserve a lot of other goods. The final thing is all of these things at a certain time in history have had a limited supply. The only thing that doesn't seem to have a limited supply is our fiat currency. And that goes back to what we were talking about earlier in this video about having a store of value. Because all of these other goods, whether it's silver or gold or whiskey or ammunition or salt, all of them have a limited supply out there. Whereas the paper currency, that is going to be its downfall. You can just print and print and print our paper currency. Well, I guess you can't, but the federal government can. And with that, this value of that paper currency is going to go down. Now, just because it's not storing its value as well doesn't mean we shouldn't have it in our plans and shouldn't have it for emergency situations. Because like we talked about at the beginning of the video, cash is king when it comes to emergency situations, and we should all have a cash reserve in case of emergencies. I hope everyone enjoyed this video and talking about different barter items, because I think it's something that a lot of people kind of blow out of proportion in the silver and gold community, and they forget about the value of cash and having some of the other items out there that can be valuable to other people. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to leave a like and comment down below. I really do enjoy hearing from each and every one of you, and I hope all of you take care.